Hi there, welcome to Flaming Star Podfics. Today we will be reading Your Body is My Canvas by I Am Broken on AO3. You can find a link to the story in the description. This is a Batman, all media types, alt universe story featuring Damian Wayne and Jonathan Kent. It is a canon divergence story and it is rated for teen and up audiences. This is a one-shot, and here's the summary. It was strange, not in a bad way, just different. Where Jon and Damian are completely in love with each other, yet only the two of them haven't realized it yet. Or where Damian asks for help with the school painting project and Jon accepts. It was a curious sensory experience. Jon arrived at the mansion wearing his plaid jacket, which Connor judged harshly. He didn't know why he was so nervous. He went to Wayne Manor as often as he went to his own house, especially since last year, when he and Damian started attending the same grade, right after he returned from space 2 years older. However, they always went together, and there was always someone there. Alfred, Bruce, or one of their brothers or relatives. Today, it would just be the two of them. The boy rings the doorbell next to that huge door. He hears the sound echoing through the house. His heart begins to race slightly, without knowing exactly why. Firm yet light footsteps approach him. When he opened the door, there was Damian, his straight hair now longer, tied up in a messy bun. He was wearing one of his outfits, which Jon thought were super chic for staying at home. A black turtleneck tank top, athletic shorts, and a smug look on his face. Of course, he wasn't forgetting his accessories, bracelets, necklace, rings. Good afternoon, Smallville. He crosses his arms and leans against the door frame. Good afternoon, sweetie, Jon teases. You're late. Jon freezes and looks at the clock on his cell phone. 2 minutes? Late. Okay, I'm late. Shall we go? Tch. All right, latecomer. Damian makes room for Jon to pass. The place seemed even bigger without anyone there. The boy closes the door with his foot and steps forward, heading into the living room. There was a well-prepared space there. It even looked like a combination of an operating room and an art studio. Canvas on the floor, pillows, cloths, paints, brushes. Where had he gotten himself into? So, he looks at the boy, who was putting on an apron. You can take off your shirt. Okay, do you need some help? He looks at Damian, who is trying to tie his apron. No, do your job, Kent. Jon hesitates and takes a moment to respond sharply. Okay, angry birdie. Call me that again and I'll paint Godzilla on your back. Hey, Jon murmurs. Godzilla is pretty cool. The teenager took off his jacket and then his t-shirt. He was much stronger now and still taller than Damian, who had also grown considerably, but was much more slender than the Kryptonian. Damian was arranging the paints, focused and crouched on the floor, his apron slightly loose. The other man quickly approached and tightened the knot. Damian lets out an internal squeal. You son of a language, bitch. Damian, you scared me. He stands up, finishing arranging the brushes, when he turns to face Jonathan. His waist is outlined by the apron. Oh, God. Okay, we can begin the process. Lie on your stomach. Jon obeys. You talk as if you're about to perform a super important procedure. And isn't it? Of course. Arguing with an excited Damian, he wasn't crazy. The ground was kind of cold. Gotham was cold. Here, put a pillow there or you'll get a stiff neck. Oh, thanks for being kind. You'd normally say that aliens don't get stiff necks. Well, yes, but supposedly there was a real person here. Hey, seriously? I asked Dick to help me, he says, opening some paint cans. However, he had to attend the mission along with the rest of the family. Oh, and Alfred? It's his day off. He went out for an afternoon coffee with the Kents. Really? That's why I heard Grandma cooking pumpkin pie. That makes sense, he says, climbing on top of Jon and sitting on his lower back. Jon freezes slightly as he feels the warmth of Damian's body against his. Wow. Wow. What was that? Are you going to call me fat? The boy feels the pressure of the dark-haired man's slender body against his own. No, he laughs. It's actually quite mild. I was just surprised. The sensation of the brush stroke on his back made the boy shudder slightly. The paint was cold and tickled the center of his spine. Don't move. Sorry, he smiles, looking to the side. It tickles. Focus. It would be easier if you put on a movie or something. I didn't bring my headphones. I'll put it on later. Let me finish this part first. Okay, what are you painting? Sun, he whispers, concentrating. Obviously. Don't complain. I'm not going. Damian was drawing a basic shape, a circle with rays around it. It was just to test what it would be like to work with Jonathan's skin texture. It was an interesting project, but quite bothersome and laborious. Besides, it would be worth his art grade for the semester. Not that he cared about it that much. Jon begins to drift through his memories, trying to focus on not blushing or flinching at Damian's touches on his back. Gradually, he begins to think about how he ended up in that situation. 3 days ago, he and Damian were responsible for taking care of Lizzie. This was never an easy task, not because she was difficult, a little actually, but because the universe always seemed to conspire to get them into strange adventures. Damian rests his wrist on Jon's back. He said he would stay with the girl since he didn't have any extracurricular activities that afternoon. However, something unexpected happened. The Titans called him at the last minute. What could he have done? So he called Damian, who was in the middle of a mission to capture one of the League's assassins. He wanted information about Ra's al Ghul's new plan. The ringing sound ends up getting him into trouble. Besides, who forgets to turn off their ring phone on a secret mission against evil ninjas? Damian returns home a few hours later, looking like he'd escaped a bombing. His hair is disheveled, his nails are broken, and he has a cut on his upper lip. And of course, his furious expression didn't help the situation. Damian's fingernail grazed his skin. He fractured one of his ribs and had therefore been placed on the patrol bench for that week. Goodness, it would take a lifetime to convince Damian to forgive him. After returning from the mission with the Titans, Jonathan went to get Lizzie to take her to Diana. The little girl was sleeping in Damian's arms, who in turn was staring at Superman with a deadly look. Finally, he said sharply. Damian leaned a little further over Jon's torso, who could hear his heartbeat perfectly. Of course he tried to apologize, but he said, "It's okay, and it's obvious that it wasn't. I'll do anything, I swear. I don't need your favors, Kent." And there it was, a few days later, Damian making a formal request for Jonathan to help him with an art class project. And of course he would accept. The brush bristles swirl through the underlying layer of paint in a spiral. Damian slides his finger over one of the lines that would form the lightning bolts, spreading the ink. Jon gets chills. I finished. Can I get up now? The sun. Jon sighs. Which movie would you like to watch? I don't know. It could be something really silly. Damian gets up. The feeling is strange, as if something is missing. He barely noticed when the boy turned on the television and the movie's intro began. He closes the paint can and sits down again, now a little further back, almost on Jon's thighs. Looking at the screen, he sees the Studio Ghibli logo. Seriously? His lips curl into a goofy smile. It's a good source of inspiration, and there's nothing too distracting. Jon lets out a muffled laugh into his forearms. What are you going to draw now? Crypto. My dog? Damian said nothing, though Jon could practically see him rolling his eyes in his mind. Obviously Kent. To pass the time, the boy decides to focus on the TV. It was different. The lighting was soft. Every brushstroke seemed to be an integral part of the cinematic atmosphere. Which movie is this? Kiki's Delivery Service. I don't think I've ever seen that one. He leans back against his arms. The pressure felt somewhat akin to Damian's weight resting against him. The movie was quiet. It seemed to leave just enough sonic space for conversation, and Jon found himself sighing softly during certain scenes. The painting felt even more sensory. It was as if Damian were filling his entire back with paint. The spot where the cold sun had once been now felt warm. Damian was completely absorbed in his work. Once he finished blocking in the shapes and basic forms, he leaned in a little closer over Jon. He settled his weight against the small of the boy's back. The previous strokes had been quick and heavy-handed, but these were soft, slow, and precise. As the boy moved closer, Jon could feel his warm breath on his back. Damn, he'd been holding back from shivering. He tried to focus on the film, on the character's voice. Had he heard it before? But he holds his breath as soon as Wayne rests his left hand completely on his shoulder. His features are becoming increasingly delicate and subtle. They felt like strands of hair touching his skin. It seems to last for hours. Jon was very hot, very hot. The air conditioning was on. He hoped not to sweat. I'm just going to do some star tattoos on your shoulder blade. It's very hollow. Then we can take a break. Jon hesitated to respond, as if the sound of Damian's voice held him too anchored to interrupt. Jonathan? Ah, sure. In due time. Okay. Damian climbs down from Jon's back and settles beside his shoulder blade. A warm shadow covers his back. He could feel his ears heating up with each touch on his shoulder. Nothing like the punches he used to get when they were younger, or the angry slaps. The stars made standardized movements. The boy from Kansas felt his muscles contract even before the touch. He stood up from the floor, letting the cool air cover Jon's back. An unusual relief. He picked up his cell phone and snapped a picture. Jon feels the warm flash against his skin. Can I see? Damian knelt down and showed the photo to the Kryptonian. It was incredible. Damian had transformed his back into a canvas. Crypto looked remarkably like him, even down to the color of his fur. His lips curled slightly, as if he could smell the dog just by looking at the image. Damian says something that Jon can't hear. Huh? Are you hungry? Thirsty? Not really. His words are interrupted by the sound of his stomach grumbling. Traitor. The boys smile sarcastically. Todd made cookies with jam yesterday. I'll go get some. Jon stands in the room for seconds that feel like an eternity. His eyes wander over to the TV screen, over the old but chic furniture. He listens to the sound of the air conditioner, the sound of Damian rummaging through the cupboards and pots in the kitchen, and him coming back. Jon was about to get up when Damian stopped him. Hey, you're going to ruin my art! The boy quickly knocks him down, avoiding touching the wet spots. Sorry, Jon exclaims, somewhat startled, but how am I supposed to eat lying down? It's impossible that you can't do it. The dark-skinned boy sat down in front of Jon. The smell of the cookies was divine, sweet and familiar, like the ones his grandmother used to make. My God, you live among culinary gods. I swear if I lived here, I would be enormous. I have self-control, Damian grumbles and pushes the plate closer. Jon tries to grab the cookie, but Damian stares coldly at him. What is it? You're moving your shoulder blade too much. You're going to crack the paint. Jon pauses for a second, trying to think. His stomach churns slightly. What should I do then? You're a walking disaster, alien. Damian grabs one of the crackers from the plate and lifts Jon's chin with 2 fingers. Jon freezes for a moment, his eyes sliding over Damian's slightly parted lips, then darting to those intense green irises. Open your mouth. Jon is taking a while. What? Damian sighs heavily. I'll put the biscuit in your mouth so you don't ruin my work, Kent. Is it so hard to understand? Jon wanted to bury his head in the ground, Damian's thin, calloused fingers supporting his chin with considerable pressure. He hesitated for a moment and then opened his mouth. He was sure his cheeks were red. The boy shoves the cookie into his mouth. The sweet taste of strawberry and the sensation of it melting into his are overshadowed when Damian's fingers brush the corner of his lips. Jon feels a sticky substance on the opposite corner from where the other had touched. Damian wipes away the excess jelly that had slid from the boy's mouth. You eat very clumsily, Kent. It's not easy to bite off a cookie that size in one bite, okay? He retorted, still embarrassed. The other rolls his eyes and breaks the cookies into smaller pieces. The sound is muffled by the chewing on Jon's head. Damian holds another piece as Jon finishes swallowing the first and shoves it into Jon's mouth. This time, he tastes Dami's fingers. Slightly bittersweet. Warm. Ew, are you that hungry, farm boy? Jon laughs as Damian wipes the finger he had accidentally licked. Oh, you have no idea, sweetheart. Disgusting. They continue the feeding process, or at least try to. By the last biscuit, they were already experienced. Damian methodically shoves the medium-sized piece into Kent's mouth. Jonathan chews happily, his cheeks puffed out like a squirrel's. I'll go get a glass of water. He gets up and takes the plate to the kitchen, returning with a half-full glass and a straw. Thank you, Damie. Whatever. The boy moves back onto Jonathan's back, sitting down again on the bottom. Are you going to continue? Jon says, trying to touch his lips to the straw. Uh-huh. Last one on the back. Jon manages to drink some of the water, but it goes down his throat, icy cold. Seriously, what do you intend to do? Damian seemed to be surveying the coastline, which was already almost entirely covered. Jon felt a touch brushing against the back of his neck, and he shivered. The boy was brushing his hair away from the area. I think I have an idea, he mutters, more to himself than to his friend. Jon tries to control the urge to squirm as Damian's fingers slide across the back of his neck. His body tingled as the wet, cold ink trickled lightly down the back of his neck. Damian's warm breath near his hair contrasted sharply with this sensation. The film seemed distant now, out of focus, even through his glasses. The noises wandered in the Kryptonian's mind. Had he recently come into contact with some kind of kryptonite injection? However, his thoughts are interrupted when Damian rubs the area with a rather rough pressure. He was cleaning it with a cloth. Jon swallows hard to avoid stuttering. It didn't work? It wasn't accurate, he says through gritted teeth. Jon sighed deeply as Damian pulled away slightly from his neck. The food seemed to churn, but not as if he were about to vomit. Different. And then he noticed Damian's shadow leaning close to the nape of his neck. He could clearly feel the warm air of his breath. The pressure of his hands on his shoulders intensifies. The shadow becomes smaller. Jon tenses up completely. Damian's icy, moist lips pressed against his skin. And from one moment to the next, it was as if every part of his body was burning. He could hear his blood rushing faster. It seemed to last for hours until, calmly and methodically, Damian walked away. Jon wanted to say something sarcastic or ask for explanations, but all that came out was, what? Sharp and drawn out. It's acceptable now, the boy says, lightly running his fingers around the area. He tries to turn around to look at Damian's face, but is prevented from doing so. Wait for it to dry. Dry what? I know I'm irresistible, but this was unexpected. He could hear a muffled, frustrated sigh from Damian. Damian was wiping his lips, which were covered in blue ink. But seriously, what was that? A few seconds passed slowly until Damian finished wiping his lips and replied, I thought a lipstick brand would go well with the stars on my shoulder blade. That's not what he was talking about. Kissing me? A silence hung between them, as if Damian were deep in thought. Jon couldn't tell if the boy was embarrassed, incredulous, or simply curious about the question. I only used the outline of my mouth as a guide. I wasn't able to capture the lines properly. Just wondering, does this happen with all models? The question slips out before he could filter it. Jon freezes immediately afterward, as if he wants to pull the words back. No, be quiet. Jon obeys. Damian sits on the floor next to him, watching. You're not exactly an ideal model, he laughs sarcastically. Hey, I'm doing you a favor, remember? You're paying me for a favor. It's different. My rib still hurts, you know? Oh, please, Jon laughed. You only got angry because Bruce put you on bed rest. I hate to admit you're right, Kent. Damian flicks his forehead. Hey, ready for the next step? Next? The back is dry now, so I can add some details to the front. It's just to complement it. Damian approaches and takes another picture of Jon's back. Stand up, he says, extending his hand to Jonathan. The boy gets up with some difficulty. He had been in that position for too long. A crack runs down his spine as he straightens his back. He feels Damian's penetrating gaze on him. I think I'll get some flowers done, from shoulder to chest. Maybe something on your face, too, he says, almost to himself. Are you sure this stuff is safe to put on the skin? Obviously. And you shouldn't worry about it. That was true. Oh, who knows? Damian rolls his eyes again. Sit on that bench. He points to a small stool next to the main sofa. Jon walks obediently over there. Damian gathered the paint pots with unusual calm. His hair was now half loose from its bun, strands falling over his shoulder. His apron was now looser and dirtier, but still outlined his silhouette. He walks over to Jon, his bare feet barely making a sound. He positions the paints on the arm of the sofa and sits down, facing the model. Try not to move around too much, Damian says, picking up the paintbrush. I'll try. Jon's lips curved into a smile. He rests his hand on Jon's shoulder and begins to draw floral patterns. A lavender flower. It was even stranger to be facing Damian. He was trying to focus on the ceiling, the paintings, anything. He couldn't even follow the film's story anymore. The artist's breathing is soft. The paint no longer seems so strange, but a peculiar itch appears on his back, abdomen, and shoulder, spreading slowly. He shivers, struggling not to move. Damian was so focused that he didn't even argue with Jon. Not even a warning, just a soft, indecipherable murmurs through clenched teeth. He moved a little closer. As he approaches Jon's collarbones, the sensation intensifies on his skin, his fingers accidentally drumming against the bone. The paint slowly creeps up his neck. The itching intensifies. He closes his eyes and tries to concentrate. Soft circles formed in the area of his throat. Jon held back the saliva in his mouth, avoiding swallowing abruptly. Damian's hand slides to the base of his neck, slowly moving up to the nape of his neck and accidentally intertwining his curly hair with his fingers. The brush rises along with him, reaching his face. He sighs as they become increasingly noticeable on his skin. He only realizes he's been standing still for too long when he runs out of air for a moment, forcing him to open his eyes. Jon was waiting nearby, but not that close. He could clearly see every detail of Damian's face. Tiny scars, almost insignificant marks. He could count the hairs on his eyelashes if he wanted to. There were ink stains on parts of his face, mainly his nose and cheeks. The tip of his tongue would slip out from between his lips, an old habit. Damian seemed to be looking right through Jon, and at the same time directly at him. It was difficult to say which of the two was worse. But then the brush slowed down as it approached the boy's cheekbones. For an almost insignificant moment, Damian looks away from the painting and gazes into Jon's nervous blue eyes. The boy doesn't notice when his hand instinctively slides down to Dami's waist. The touch is light, as if afraid to break the moment. Still, Damian freezes for a millisecond. They both felt each other's faces grow hot. Damian lowers the brush slightly, very slowly. The distance between them is decreasing, not enough to be intentional, but not by chance either. Jon's gaze wavers, dropping for a moment and meeting his lips. Damian realizes. His jaw clenches. He bites his lower lip, thoughtful or undecided. He's not making any progress, but it doesn't distance itself either. The main door opens. Hey kids? Connor stops at the door frame, hand in hand with Tim, who just stares at the two of them. Frowns. Jon walks away too quickly. Damian already had his paintbrush raised again, as if nothing had happened. A dangerous grin appears on Tim's face. Did we interrupt something, dames? Or is it just a new artistic method? Don't be ridiculous, substitute, Damian says through gritted teeth. Sure, it looks pretty technical. Tim's gaze sweeps over the scene, too calmly. Damn that family of detectives. Connor frowns behind his sunglasses, staring at Jon. Wait, lil bro? Tim elbows him. Later. And he looks back at Damian. Relax, I didn't see anything. He stops. If you haven't seen it either, he winks at the youngest. Damian narrowed his eyes in disgust. How he hated Drake. Tim just smiles, already pulling Connor by the shoulder. Come on, Con, before we get in the way of the art. Hey, but Tim's bedroom door closes behind them. Jon stares at the closed door for a second longer than he should and laughs nervously. What was that, Smallville? Damian says, still frowning. Your family is weird. And yours isn't? He brushes Jon's nose with the bristles of the paintbrush, leaving a small purple mark. Clown. Hey, he exclaims in surprise and almost falls off the stool. Damian smiles sarcastically, but with a genuine touch. Jon tries to clean up the ink, but ends up leaving some residue. It went out? No. Jon chuckled softly, still trying to clean up. Damian holds his wrist for a moment. Be quiet. I'll fix it. The touch is more precise this time, more careful. Jon doesn't move. Doesn't even try. He simply watches in silence. It was strange, not in a bad way, just different. And that is it for Your Body is My Canvas. I hope you enjoyed this one. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really sweet and kind of romantic. And it's so sweet in that young love kind of way. These kids are just starting to understand their feelings. maybe, hopefully. And it was just really cute, and I wanted to share it with you. If you enjoyed it, please go over to AO3 and let the author know, give them some love. Again, it is I Am Broken. The link to the story is in the description. And let me know what you think. Did you like this one? Is there anything that you would like me to read? And if there is, please let me know in the comments. I would be very happy to check it out and maybe include it here. In the meantime, if you can, please leave some likes, comments, please share, and please subscribe so you don't miss out on future stories. Thanks for listening.